You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show. The preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Hey, we're coming here live with another podcast. We certainly appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks for being here. Hey, we just want to announce we just blew through, somewhere in the last 48 hours, we blew through another million downloads. Holy freaking crap. If you go to our YouTube channel, there's 24 million views over there. Almost 24 million views. I'm sorry. I got to get the almost in there. It's been cranking for 12 years. What can you say? Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. We certainly appreciate you. Let's add another million to that like next week. Go to, grab your friends. Just take their hand, look deeply into their eyes and say, subscribe to the Chris Voss Show. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, hit the bell notification button, goodreads.com/Chris Voss, see everything reading and reviewing over there. All of our groups on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, the big Instagram, or not Instagram, the big LinkedIn newsletter, and the big LinkedIn group, 122,000 people over there. Go subscribe to that thing, get involved, see what's going on. You can learn everything that's happening out there. Remember, the Chris Voss Show is the family that loves you but doesn't judge you. So, best kind of family there is. In fact, people keep sending me adoption notices. They want to be adopted by the family because evidently they're not liking what they have going on. I'm just kidding. That's not really happening. The lawyers just make me say that. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. We have another amazing author on the book, and she is launching her amazing book that she has put out today, May 10th, 2022. The book is entitled Jameela Green Ruins Everything. And it's by Zarqa Nawaz. She's on the show with us today. She's going to be talking to us about her amazing book and why she wrote it and all the good stuff there in between. She is also a frequent public speaker on Islam, diversity. She created the series Little Mosque on the Prairie and the world's first sitcom about a Muslim community living in the West. The show premiered in 2007 to record ratings on CBC. The inspiration for the series came from her groundbreaking documentary, Me and the Mosque, which ultimately inspired the television series. She sold pilots to ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, and written a best-selling memoir all the way to the mosque. Both her books are out now, and she sold, let's see here, both her novel Jameela Green Ruins Everything and Zarqa, CBC Gem web series comes out this spring, and writing comedy. She lives in Regina, Saskatchewan with her long-suffering family. How are you? Welcome to the show, Zarqa.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
And have I got all the pronunciations of everything there right? There's a lot of...
Yes, Zarqa rhymes with parka.
There you go. All right.
Very
So we got everything right there, and all the way from Canada. When you say long-suffering family, I need a little bit more data on that.
I have 4 children and a husband, and they all feel like they have to put their needs behind mine, particularly when a project comes out. And God forbid if I need help with social media, which is all the time. If you have the only reason left to have children really is tech support. I'm telling you. That's the only reason.
Yeah, and gaming. You know, my brother had kids. I didn't. I just have dog kids. They're the best kind of kids because they don't require driver's license and stuff, and dating, insurance, that sort of thing. So, but my brother has a son who is really good at video games. Those crazy flipping fingers those 12-year-olds have. They're good at, and us old guys with bad eyes and bad reflexes are like, why are these 12-year-olds killing me? So I found out that if you have kids, especially young boys, you can have them go do your gaming, like raids and all the work for you, and I'm like, I would have had kids. In fact, I go down to adoption clinics and I say, are you good at Destiny and Call of Duty? Sorry, can't adopt you. Yeah, we'll find somebody who is, though. Good luck. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I don't do that, except on weekends. Anyway, so let's talk about your amazing book. Give me your plugs first so that people can find you on the interwebs.
Sure. I am on Twitter at Zarqa Nawaz, and I'll spell that ZARQANAWAZ. And same with Facebook at Zarqa Nawaz. And on Instagram, I'm the real Zarqa, because I think I managed to screw up using my real name, and then I couldn't convince them that I was that person, so then I had to change it to the real Zarqa.
There you go. So what motivated you to write this book?
I had written a memoir called Laughing All the Way to the Mosque that had been released in 2014. And I, Chris, was convinced that it should have been on the New York Times bestseller list. And when it didn't make it, I became this very bitter, vindictive writer who would have to go to these other, book festivals and see other authors beside me, and see incredible success happening to them. And, when you sit beside them and there's people lined up, like, you're thinking, oh, they're there for my book. And then you realize that it's for the author beside you. And you only have 3 people in front of you. And then I started getting more and more bitter and vindictive about the whole publishing game. And so then I decided I was just going to write a story about a woman who just does something horrible in her life because she's so mad and angry at the world for not giving her the success she deserves. So that's what the book is about. It's about a bitter, horrible Muslim woman who just driving her family batty because she just does these kooky things because she figures life owes her and it has not come through. And on top of it, she's Muslim and she prays 5 times a day to God. So she's talking to God like, what gives? Those people who do you get more success than me. So this is not fair. So she has it in for God, right? So she's really interested in God. So she goes to the local imam and she's like, how dare God not listen to me? It even says in the Quran, if you're good and do good things, you'll get what you want. And of course, the imam is this young, poor, innocent imam from Egypt who's just arrived, who cannot understand these weird Western Muslims and their coercion of God. And he's like, listen, I think that you are spending too much time being selfish and horrible. And maybe you should take care of people besides yourself. And he convinces her to look after a homeless man. And she's really upset about that. And so she doesn't want to look after the homeless. She's figured it's their fault that they're homeless. And, they live on the streets and it's a good use of taxpayers' money at night because no one's using them. And, why should we be helping them? So he's appalled by her behavior, makes her go out, and they meet a young homeless man, Barkley. And from there, a series of unfortunate events happen. I don't want to give the whole book away, but it helps Jameela realize, she goes on a bit of a hero's journey where she has to come full circle about her relationship with herself and her faith and her community and her family. So it's one of those redemption stories.
Everyone loves a redemption story. It sounds hilarious too. At least the way you're portraying it in your comedy.
It's a good funny story. Yeah, it's very funny. It's a satire.
Yeah. So did you, it sounds maybe a bit of a projection from your experience there that you base that on. It'd be basically, let's see.
Yeah, I totally based it on what I was going through for that. It took like 6 years to write. And my own publisher who had published my memoir had actually turned the book down.
Oh,
which is really upsetting.
That makes it more angry.
I was so angry. I was like, what the? Well, for those people who don't know about publishing, if you've never published a novel before, you don't get an advance because the editors and the publishing house doesn't believe in you because they feel like they don't know if you can sell anything. So they're like, no, you have got to write it first for free. And if we like it, then we'll buy it. And so it's called working on spec. You got to spend years and years working on a novel for nothing. And then it may or may not get published. And so that's what happened. They're like, yeah, we know you can publish a memoir. If you want to write another memoir, I'm like, no, I'm done with the memoirs. I don't want to write another one. I want to write a novel. And so they said no. And then I had to write it and rewrite it and rewrite it. And novels are hard. Like you think it's easy to do, but it's a craft and you have to master it. And I'm a television writer by trade, and television writing is a very different animal than novel writing. Mm-hmm. Like novels, you go into people's minds and you hear their thoughts and feelings. You can't translate that into film and television. This is why a lot of novels don't make good television, because most of them lived in people's minds, and they were fantastic because you got to hear what they were thinking and feeling. But TV doesn't do a good job translating feelings and what people are thinking internally. They're good at plot and carrying story forward. So I had to learn a whole other type of writing when I wrote the novel.
That's probably why books are better than movies. You know, everyone comes out of a movie and goes, it wasn't as good as the book. Yeah, and you're like, well, they can't, but that does explain why that happens, you know, and of course, a lot of those thoughts and feelings sometimes they have to try and express in movies or TV is, outwardly in some sort of expression, and like sometimes you can see it in the film where you're just like, that really doesn't deliver well because you're clearly trying to deliver that as some sort of drama scene that you're created and they fictionalize. And I hate it when they do that in historical films and you're like, why did you do that? And they're like, well, we had to fictionalize the whole the crisis point or the conflict, and you're like, that was really dumb. so so you wrote this book. Did you have any Hollywood people you're thinking about when it gets picked up for movies or anything? Do you have anybody that you were
It's a good question. I've had a lot of producers sniffing around, but I've decided, because I'm a television writer, and now a big thing that television writers want to do is they want to own their own IP and make things under their own production shingle. And so I feel like, given that this is a very sensitive subject because she goes to the Middle East and there's a lot of history about American foreign policy in the Middle East. We've got the Russian invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. You've got the two Gulf Wars and the whole issues of ISIS, because this is a satire about ISIS and what were the political backgrounds that made this group, form. And I feel like these are really deep, things that you can do in books, but not necessarily translate, as you said, as well in television. And I didn't want someone to make another film or TV show about Muslims as terrorists, because we have enough of those.
yeah.
And I don't want to add to that. And so this book is a satire about terrorism, but it's also a satire about the origins of terrorism,
Mhm.
how groups form, and what are the political machinations behind the scenes. And I wanted to explain that in a comedy so that it would be easier for people to understand. And for that reason, I've decided to hold on to the IP. And if I do make it, I'd like to make it myself and make it here in Canada. So that's why I haven't sold the rights, much to my agent's annoyance. I want to those rights.
I think you would be good at playing the part. I think you should hold on to that. That should be one of those things. Who was the gal who wrote she wrote that Greek thing, My Greek Brother, My
Wedding.
Greek Wedding. Yeah, and didn't she starred in it too herself? And like there was nobody who could play that part but her. It just
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just great. The It sounds like it's quite the funny comedy bit. I guess I won't be exposing anything because this is on the Amazon thing here. What was the name of the parody that you used for ISIS?
So I didn't want to call them ISIS, so I called them the Dominion of the Islamic Caliphate and Kingdom. So they were called Dick. And the original title for the book was The Rise and Fall of Dick, which my kids loved. But close to publication, the editors are like, no, marketing is telling us that when we put that in Google, we get the wrong images. So they took it away from me. My children were horrified, just horrified.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. I was gonna go with the joke. I think Gloria Steinem already has that reserved. The Rise and Fall of Dick. Dominion of the Islamic Caliphate and Kingdoms. That's just hilarious. So they get into the CIA. It really opens up a Pandora's box, and this goes on quite the travel.
It does. I mean, I had no idea how incredibly involved the CIA is in other people's lives. It's pretty crazy. Like, they take down government, they take down leaders, they even in Afghanistan at one point they decided they wanted to indoctrinate all these children and turn them into really violent, radical, extremists. So they had books published in Virginia and shipped to the madrasas in Afghanistan to like indoctrinate little children.
Holy
And I was
crap.
reading about this going, what the? Because the American government felt at the time the Russians, just like the Russians have invaded Ukraine, the Russians had invaded Afghanistan. They had come out of, this humiliating 10-year loss to Vietnam, and they did not want another country to succumb to communism. So they were doing everything humanly possible. And just like today, they couldn't send in their own troops. So they were flooding the area with arms and weapons, and turned out they were sending books to little children to convince them to fight the Russians and how they had to become violent, and they were convincing them that jihad was part of their faith and they had to go and fight. And it was like I was reading this going, this is nuts. Like a whole project, $50 million to get little children to grow up and be violent. And then people wonder, like, what's wrong with the people in Afghanistan? You're like, well, a lot of things went wrong over the decades. From a lot of people were recruited. There was one of the biggest worldwide recruiting efforts to get men to Afghanistan to fight the Russians. But like, what happens when the fight is over and you've given them all these arms and military training and they're looking for a cause? And so a lot of destabilizations of countries around that area happened at that time. And it's so interesting. It was fascinating reading this, because I think that a lot of times, with American foreign policy, we do not learn the lessons of the past, and we keep repeating them over and over again in other situations, and then the same thing happens. So I thought, for the average person who just wants a beach read, they just want to read a spy thriller, they don't want to have to read about the history of the Middle East, this is a good book because it doesn't feel like anyone's teaching you anything. It's just a really funny satire. And just like little tiny nuggets of information are seeded throughout the book just to give you a sense of it. And it's all true. This happened.
Well, this is funny. I mean, I love the way you put it all down. The one thing man can learn from his history is man never learns from his history, as we always say on the show. The CIA, the history of the CIA. I mean, the Bay of Pigs. I mean, you just keep going back. I mean, we create so many monsters. In fact, I believe tied in with those books was the money we were giving to Osama bin Laden to help him fight the Russians. Yes. And then once we cut him off, he's like, oh yeah, revenge time.
Allies. He was a CIA ally.
We do that all the time. We fund the worst people, and then they end up betraying us, and then they become the worst dictators ever, or something. Pinochet. I mean, the Shah of Iran. I mean, you just pick your whatever.
All of those guys.
Yeah, it's always funny. Yeah, the interesting thing about the Iraq War is a lot of it started because Saddam wanted to take his oil off of the dollar. There's a lot of what that was about with that thing. Because the almighty US dollar is the currency of the world, and they can't have people doing that. That's what Russia has been trying to do for years, and of course China. But there you go. So it's good that you put some levity to the serious things and some of the dark things in our history. Anything more you want to touch on the book or tease out about the book? Maybe a story or anything you think people find interesting?
I just think that if it's a book that appeals on all sorts of levels. Like if you're someone who is having a really rough time in life and doesn't know how to go forward with their career, or is really down and kind of losing yourself to despair, it's a good book to read because it's just about hope and going forward and not, becoming obsessed with your own failures and how to get out of that. And if that's all you want to learn and read about, it's about that. If you're someone who's a person of faith and you're having a hard time connecting with the whole issue of what does prayer mean, what does spirituality mean, there's those issues. If you just want to read about an international spy novel that's funny, this is the book for you. If you want to learn about Middle Eastern history and the Russian invasion in Afghanistan and the 2 Gulf Wars, but you want to learn it in a lighthearted, fun, accessible way, this is the book for you. It's a book on a lot of different levels, and it appeals to a wide range of people, which really surprised me because I hadn't understood it when I first read it. The book that inspired it was, I don't know if you've heard about this. It was mailed to me from France. The Extraordinary Journey of the Fakir Who Got Trapped in an IKEA Wardrobe.
No.
It's a really funny comedy about the history of migration law in Europe. But again, a comedy, written from the point of view of a migrant who's trying to smuggle his way through Europe. And it was one of those books where you learned so much about a really difficult, serious subject that affects so many people, yet it was so funny and so enjoyable. And it was written by a former immigration law officer in France.
Satire really is, and comedy is the best way to deliver truth and education to people, and stories that people can adopt. People go read the newspaper, and sadly they go blank. They're just like, oh my god, all this data. And satire is a good way to make people, even sometimes change their minds. They're like, wow, I didn't really think about that differently, but now that comedian says that makes all the difference in the world.
You're right. I mean, comedy is a great way to communicate difficult subjects and have people lower their guard and say, hey, I laughed at that. Normally, I would never laugh at something like that. And
Yeah.
then maybe examine the subject in a different way.
It's a great way too to present, like you say, to ourselves, a mirror to ourselves, where it's like, hey, here's you in the mirror, and instead of something angry and mean, like you're an idiot, it's a funny way where you go, maybe I'm kind of an idiot. This is kind of silly what we do. Why are we doing this? So yeah, comedy is a great way to do that. Do you see future books coming out of this, or a series, maybe?
I'd like to adapt it for television, and then I'd like to find a way to make it into a series.
Mhm.
I would love it if Jameela could have these adventures with this poor innocent imam from Egypt who doesn't quite understand the West or Western Muslims, and constantly embroils him into all her adventures. So
Mhm.
yeah, so this is how television series are made: is that you find a relationship that could keep going, that's some sort of adventurous stories that could keep going with a protagonist who keeps making mistakes. You want a protagonist who never quite has it together and who is someone who forever makes the wrong decisions because of her personality. That's the difference between, say, a novel and a television series. A novel, the person is expected to change and become a better person. But in a television series, they stay the same, right? Like if you watch Modern Family, Will isn't suddenly becoming smart and logical and making sure he doesn't make the mistakes that he always does constantly in every episode. So I feel like this character is someone who's angry enough and bitter enough and vindictive enough that she would continue her machinations and her revenge fantasies as she goes through life.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't ever resolve it and fix it, because then you'd have the story would be over in like what, 2 episodes or something.
Exactly.
So yeah, you'd have that. So you can't have that. You gotta constantly, you gotta have the slow moving car crash. that's that's stuff we all enjoy in life and everything. Do you feel like the character, there's a lot of people that are really kind of selfish, entitled, and narcissistic today. Have you been on Instagram lately? Um, did you feel like maybe it's kind of speaking out a little bit about some of that behavior?
Yeah, I mean, the trouble with Instagram and social media is that we only put our best foot forward and
Mhm.
we present this shiny, perfect version of our lives. And so that makes everybody feel very sad about their own life when they see everyone else's wonderful Instagram life. I think there have been a lot of studies on this, Chris, that being on social media makes you sad. It doesn't actually make you happy. And it's best to disconnect and just connect with the real people in your lives and limit how much we go on social media and constantly examine each other's lives, because it doesn't give you a real true reflection of the type of lives each one of us is living.
Yeah, there's always, I mean, I've been on social media since the beginning of Twitter and stuff, and yeah, the joke's always been that, these people don't lead the lives they lead. And a friend of mine sent me a picture from Australia, and she showed these girls posing in front of trains and stuff in outfits for their Instagram, just about getting hit by trains all the time because they're on the tracks, busy posing. It's always funny how much work you see some of it, and you're like, you must spend half your day doing that, and you have like 3 kids and a husband. Like that, you have a lot of time on your hands. you know, you'll see all the back posting that they're doing, and they're like, yeah, it took like 3 hours to do that, and a professional cameraman, and then God knows how much of Photoshop. I'm a photographer, so I do Photoshop. So I can look at some pictures and be like, yeah, that was probably an hour or two right there. Yeah. So it's funny. Commentary on our life and times in the human race. Anything more you want to plug out on the show before we go?
Well, for those people who've never seen Little Mosque on the Prairie, it's now airing on Amazon in the US, because I know a lot of people love that show in Canada. It's a comedy about a Muslim community that can't afford a mosque, and so they the local church can't afford rent because all the people have left. So they rent out the basement to the mosque. So it's a mosque in a church in a little tiny town, and Mercy,
Wow.
Saskatchewan. So it's now on Amazon. I know that in the last interview I was doing, people were complaining that these new shows are only like a season, 2 seasons, and then disappear. But this one is 6 seasons,
Oh
91
wow.
episodes. Completely, it was back in the days when there were 20 episodes this season. So if you want to see a really fun, lighthearted family comedy, it's called Little Mosque on the Prairie, and it's on Amazon. I know in Canada it's free. I think in the US you may have to like buy one of those sub channels. Probably something like that. But
Yeah.
that was the last show that I did, and it was hugely popular. It was one of the most popular shows that we had in our country. So if people are interested, it's now available in the United States.
There you go. You know, it'd be funny. One of my favorite Canadian comedies is Trailer Park Boys.
Oh yeah, that's a good
I
one.
love that show. In fact, I think people think I'm Ricky. Is Ricky the one who doesn't drink? One of my friends are like, "You're Ricky," and I'm like, "Screw you." But you know, it'd be funny as a Muslim Trailer Park Boys. Maybe I don't know.
One day.
Maybe I don't know. I just love that show. It's funny as hell.
It's good.
So thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate you coming here and being with us today, Zarqa.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
There you go. Give me your plugs, your .coms one last time so people can find you on the interwebs.
I'm at Zarqa Nawaz on Twitter and Facebook, and The Real Zarqa on Instagram.
There you guys go. Order the book up today. It's hot off the presses. Just came out today. You can order it in Kindle audiobook, hardcover, paperback, audio CD, everything. Jameela Green ruins everything. I love the cover. And get the baby ordered. Wherever fine books are sold is where you can order them. But remember, stay away from those alleyway bookstores. Usually either need a tetanus shot or you might get shoved in them. So just be careful. Go to the fine bookstores. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, all those crazy places all those kids are playing on the interwebs. The Chris Voss Show is at. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you guys next time.